muscles. How do muscles contract? What are muscles made of? What's their anatomy? What's their function? How do they produce movement in the body? Okay, first of all, a muscle is a type of tissue. Muscles are responsible for either moving things through the body or moving the body through things around it, the environment. That's what the muscles are responsible for movement, okay? A muscle itself consists of basically three major parts. You've got the body of a muscle. Let's say your bicep right here. You've got the body of a muscle. That's the bulk of it. You then have what's called the origin. That's the tendon that connects the muscle to the bone up here. And then you have the insertion. That's the tendon that connects the muscle to the bone down here. Okay? The difference between origin and insertion is easy. During a contraction, the origin doesn't move. The insertion does. Let me show you. So here's my bicep, okay? And I've got my origin up here connected to my shoulder and my insertion down here connected to my forearm. When my bicep contracts, forearm comes toward the body, the shoulder stays in place. So that's the origin, that's the insertion. The origin and the insertion are made up of tendons. Tendons are responsible for connecting muscle to bone or sometimes muscle to other muscle. Depends on where you are in the body. But muscle to bone is what we're going to talk about now. Okay? That tendon actually spreads out over most of that muscle, kind of giving it this special shiny thing. If you've ever helped your mom like make chicken or something else, cooking in the kitchen with meat, you'll notice that sometimes there's that purpley kind of shiny stuff that seems to be covering the muscle, the meat that you're working with. Well, that's a part of that covering that extends from the tendon and extends up over. Or better yet, you're eating a chicken leg, you're munching on a yummy KFC chicken leg, and you get that little chewy, thick thing at the bottom of your drumstick. You know what I'm talking about? That's the Achilles tendon of the chicken. That's the chicken Achilles tendon. If Achilles were a chicken, that would be where Paris shot him. Okay, if you don't know that story, you'll have to look it up. All right, so the muscle itself is not just one evenly distributed chunk of stuff. It's actually broken down into smaller subunits. The muscle itself is actually clusters of little things called fascicles. These fascicles are clusters, or bundles would be a better word, bundles of what are called muscle fibers. A muscle fiber and a muscle cell are the same thing. They are synonyms. Muscle fibers, muscle cells, same thing, okay? So a muscle fiber is actually smaller, it's actually a cluster of small bundles of myofibrils, and myofibrils are composed of filaments. Now there's two different types of filaments that we need to talk about. There's the thick filament called myosin, and then there's the thin filament called actin. And it's the movement of the actin across the surface of the myosin that actually produces the contraction in your body, in your muscle. So if I have a myosin filament at either end, clustered on either end, are a series of what are called myosin heads. Okay, here, hold on a second. So let's imagine this stick right here is a thick filament. Okay, so clustered on either end are these little curved, what are called myosin heads. And they're on this end, and they're over here on this end. All right, and that's the myosin. And they have these myosin heads. Okay, now, when a contraction occurs, the basic unit of contraction is called the sarcomere. Okay, the sarcomere is a group of myosin and a whole bunch of actin that are around it. Myosin fibers or filaments and actin filaments around it. The actin filaments are a thin filament. So this will be my actin, okay? So we have the myosin, and we'll have an actin here and an actin here and another myosin to actin, another myosin to actin. Same thing on this side. We'll have same myosin as over here, right? We'll have another actin and then actin underneath and a myosin to actin, right? And so we have these groups, just like your fingers kind of going like this, right? So if these are all the myosins, and here's all the actins, and you have another group of actins on that side, all right? And when contraction occurs, those actins slide toward the middle of the myosin. They slide toward the middle of the myosin. Okay? And the way that they do that is by allowing little tiny, the myosin heads to attach to the actin, and literally when it attaches, it pulls that fiber this way. It changes its shape and pulls that fiber along. How does that occur? Okay, you've got nerves, the motor nerves that go from your brain and spine out to your muscles. Okay? Each of those motor nerves will terminate in what's called an axon terminal point, right? The terminus of an axon, and that will be attached to a muscle fiber. One nerve might be attached to multiple muscle fibers. That one nerve and all of the muscle fibers that it activates, that's called a motor unit, okay? So what happens is this. The brain says to the body, to the muscle, you've got to contract. We got to move the hand. Maybe there's a mosquito and you got to do this or whatever. It's got to move, okay? So your brain sends the signal out to your muscle. It innervates, it sends the signal down that nerve, and that energizes, innervates those muscle fibers, causing them to contract. Well, actually, the way it does is when that nerve signal hits the muscle fibers, it causes calcium to be released into the muscle fiber itself. Now the calcium, hold on a second. I gotta get my cells back up here. That calcium itself, actually, the actin fiber itself has coiled around it another protein called tropomyosin. Now that tropomyosin, it's interesting. Tropo means movement. Myosin refers to muscle. You would think this means to move the muscle. The tropomyosin actually stops the muscle from moving. Kind of weird, but there it is. All right, so this tropomyosin is wrapped around the actin filaments. When the calcium comes in and floods this area, floods this fiber and covers all of these actin and myosin filaments, it causes that tropomyosin to release. And that exposes the bonding sites on the actin so that the myosin head right here can grab that actin and pull it this way. It pulls it like that toward the center of the myosin. When that's happening on all sides, it causes that sarcomere to shorten, to contract. Now, one little sarcomere contracting is nothing, but when you have 11 bajillion sarcomeres all inside of a muscle and all of them contract that little tiny bit, it produces an overall large movement of the muscles, causing your arm or your leg or your head or whatever to have that movement, to produce that movement. When those motor units are firing to cause your muscles to work, right, your brain is able to assess the mass, the gravitational attraction, therefore the weight of something as it picks it up, okay? So if I pick up a small pebble, like this one right here, okay? If I pick this up, okay? My body knows, my brain's able to analyze that and know that, hey, I don't have to exert a lot of force. So what happens is my brain doesn't tell all of my muscle fibers to fire. Not all of my motor units are working. So as a matter of fact, I can hold this pebble out here and I can keep holding it, all right? And there's a few of my motor units are firing. When those begin to fatigue, another set of motor units will take over, continue the contraction, to continue to hold it. When those fatigue, another set will go. When all those fatigue, I'll go back to the first set because they will have recovered, and I can continue to maintain the holding of this pebble for quite a long time. Now, if something is heavier, like this rock right here, all right, I can't hold this very long because I'm using more of my motor units at any one moment, so I don't have a chance when those give out to switch to another set, but the first set doesn't have a chance to recover before fatigue sets in, and I can't hold it. So this is part of what allows endurance to occur, right? The more you can build up your muscle's ability to recover quickly so that your brain can alternate one set of motor units for another set back and forth, that will help the endurance to increase and your strength to be able to endure or maintain throughout an activity. And that's how endurance works. That's how your brain can adjust things. This is also why, by the way, when your brain thinks that something is heavy, it fires all of those motor units at one time. That's why when you go to pick up something that you think is heavy and it's not, it's really light, that's why you grab it and go, whoa, like that. That's why that happens, because your body's fired all of its motor units to contract those muscles and lift that up, and it didn't need it, and that's why the thing flies up in the air and you fall back on your back, and everyone points and laughs, and it's really humiliating, but that's okay, because eventually you get over it and you can forgive those people. Not saying that that happened or anything, not saying I'm scarred from childhood. I'm kidding, I just made all that up. I really wasn't. But that's how muscles work. That's how they contract to maintain endurance and to lift things up of different masses. That's why when you're holding something heavy, you fatigue out faster and have to put it down, and, compared to when you're holding something very light. Isn't that cool? I think it's really cool.